Hello friends and welcome to another video from my series Quick Thoughts On, in which I always talk about different stories from the Star Trek universe. 30 years and a few weeks ago a new episode of Star Trek The Next Generation aired for the first time, called The Goodbye, and these are my honest opinions about it. The first bunch of episodes of the new show was aired between September 1987 and November 1987, and boy, were those episodes bad. It was so embarrassing to rewatch them again. Some of them were okay, but there were episodes like Code of Honor, which belongs to the worst Star Trek stories ever. To be honest, if a show started today with the same quality, it would be cancelled. It's amazing to see that Next Gen managed to get 7 seasons. So how did the second half of the first season hold up? The first episode of the second half was aired on January 11th, 1988. It was written by Tracy Torme, who is a man who seriously knows what he's doing, so that's a good start. But at the same time, he co-wrote Haven, so... But is the story actually good? Well, yes. Don't get me wrong, it still has many illogical moments, but it's a huge improvement if you compare it to the first half of the season. The Enterprise is en route to a meeting with a bug life race called the Harada. Picard has the order to establish a diplomatic contact, which means he has to start it with a full official greeting in their language, which is a problem because the insect language is obviously quite different from English. After Troy sees his mental state, she recommends him to visit the holodeck, and we get lots of useless information where Picard explains with a voiceover that the machine can create any simulation you want. I never liked this type of over explanation in sci-fi movies. For example, when in Back to the Future 2, Doc Brown has to first explain to Marty the concept of an alternate timeline and then literally draw it on the blackboard. I hate when writers think their audience is stupid. The program that Picard starts is a simulation of Dixon Hill, who is a fictional private investigator from the early 20th century. And Picard, as Hill, has immediately his first case. Mrs. Jessica Bradley hires him to find out who is trying to kill her. Because everybody makes fun of Picard's uniform, he decides to change his outfit and come back later, much to the dismay of a certain Mr. Leach. Now Picard calls a meeting in the observation lounge and he behaves like... well, it's hard to describe. He looks like a cross between a kid who has seen for the first time the original Star Wars, a teenager who had just his first sex, and a salesman who is trying to sell them the holodeck technology. It's funny to see him in that state, but he's a bit out of character in this scene. They have a small talk about the Rada mission, but let's get the crap out of the way. Picard asks Beverly and a historian named Mr. Redshirt, sorry, I meant Mr. Whalen, to come with him. That was just an error from my part. I'm sure nothing bad would happen to him, right? Data quickly reads all of the Dixon Hill novels and joins them in the holodeck. When they arrive to the San Francisco simulation, an unexpected thing happens. Mrs. Bradley was murdered, and because she had Hill's business card, Picard gets arrested as the main suspect. Meanwhile, in the quote-unquote real world, the Harada scan the Enterprise with their powerful beam of purpleness. The beam messes up the holodeck system. Dr. Crusher gets almost crushed with the huge door, but she doesn't react. Well, I guess it's normal that the doors try to kill her, right? Is she used to the fact that since she became Crusher, that things try to crush her? I mean, call me old-fashioned, but if a piece of my equipment tried to kill me, I would call a technician or an exorcist, but I would definitely not use it. But don't care about safety, it's time for some fun. She arrives to the same police station where she is having a huge amount of fun. You know, to be honest, Gates McFadden seems to really enjoy shooting this episode. She does tons of very subtle visual gags, which you have to actually watch more than once to notice. At least some of them. Here she tries to replicate the look of a woman until she realizes that the woman is a hooker. Picard is meanwhile having lots of fun during the interrogation, but when the good cop, bad cop routine doesn't work and they have absolutely no evidence, they have to let him go. So they all head to Dixon Hill's office, where they find a nasty surprise, Mr. Leach with a gun. In the real world, Geordi finds out he can't contact the crew members inside the holodeck and that he can't open the door. When Wesley hears it, he wants to go there. Riker tells him politely to piss off, but when Troy reminds him that his mother is trapped there, he suddenly allows it. Can we be at least a bit logical here? I know that Wesley is supposed to be kind of a wunderkind, the Mozart of science, but honestly he's just a teenager, and the fact that he is emotionally affected by it is a good point against him going there. I mean, there is a good reason why we don't allow doctors to do surgery on their relatives, but okay, let's imagine now for a moment that Wesley is now the only person who can fix the holodeck. You know, I start to see why fans hated Wesley Crusher, and please note that I am talking about Wesley and not Will Wheaton. I really liked Will Wheaton until he started to attack people who criticized Star Wars The Force Awakens. I lost all of my respect to him just in one video. Meanwhile, Mr. Leach, who works for Cyrus Redblock, the coolest villain we have seen on the show so far, makes it pretty clear that Mrs. Bradley stole something from him and he wants it back. When he realizes that nobody takes him seriously, he shoots the historian. That's when they realize they have a problem. Holographic bullets can't kill you, so something is wrong. Picard imagines he's Kirk for a moment and uses his fists of fury to get Leach out, but they have another problem. Wayland must go to the sickbay as quickly as possible because he will otherwise bleed to death, and they can't find any working exit. Meanwhile, we finally meet Cyrus Redblock himself, and even though he has a very small screen time, he is one of the most memorable villains, at least so far. By the way, Data tries to attack the mobsters, but Picard stops him. Why? No, really, why? You have a bulletproof, super strong robot, why don't you use him? This is the part which makes no sense. Data could solve this situation within 5 seconds. The good cop comes there too and becomes a hostage too. Picard tries to tell them the truth, but of course nobody takes them seriously, so Leach aims his gun to Dr. Crusher's head, and Picard tries a new strategy. He pretends he knows, so what the hell are they talking about, and that they will give it to them. The super genius Wesley meanwhile finds a way how to technobabble their way out, so he does something so that suddenly they are not trapped inside Hill's office, but on some iceberg or something. After a few seconds they are back and the door opens, so they can now leave and get the wounded man to sickbay. But not before Cyrus Redblock leaves together with Leach. Yes, they leave the holodeck. How? They can exist only inside the holodeck, but they suddenly can leave the place? Now, that I think about it, how could Picard come out of the room with the lipstick mark on his face? Shouldn't the lipstick disappear? Well, at least they start disappearing in the corridor. I think that this is much more cinematic, for lack of a better term, but I would prefer if scenes in my science fiction made sense, or at least if things behaved based on their previously established laws. And now, when the boss disappears, now Data destroys the gangster's gun and takes him down. But why now? He could do this all the time. The only reason why he didn't do it was that Picard stopped him. I hate when characters in a story act like morons simply because the writer doesn't know how to write a dramatic scene. Also, how many exits does a holodeck have? I always thought that there is just one exit from each holodeck room, so why are Wesley and the others not standing in front of the exit door? Does it mean that each room has more than one exit? Because that's different from the rest of the episodes. There are many episodes in which we see the holodeck without any program running. It's just a huge black room with yellow stripes and with just one door. So let's say that they didn't think it through and in this episode the holodeck has multiple different exits. In that case, why did Wesley and the team expect them to come out through that one specific door? Wouldn't it be much more logical to have somebody wait for them in front of each door? I mean, this is a rescue mission after all, isn't it? So they could expect that they will need help, right? But of course, as you could expect, we have a happy ending. Our heroes get out safely and Picard manages to say the greeting perfectly without any problems. So the diplomatic relationship with the new race we'd never see in this episode can be established. The end. As I said in the beginning, this episode is a huge improvement if you compare it with the first half of the season, and just look at the cast, you can see they are having a great time. There are many shots which seem to be at least partly improvised. I mean, I mentioned Beverly before. I also absolutely love the look and feel of the holodeck section. And the world of Dixon Hill looks very interesting. I always was hoping to see more of it. They did return back to it a few times later, but definitely not enough times. I would actually even watch a spin-off where Captain Picard as Dixon Hill would solve a new crime every week, but there are so many logical problems in this episode that it hurts your brain if you start to dig into it more. But it's definitely one of the best, if not the best episodes from the Next Generation which I talked about on this show so far. For those of you who like numerical ratings, I always use a range between 0 and 10, where 0 is complete garbage, 10 is a masterpiece, and 5 is just average. I would personally give this episode 8 out of 10. It's really great, especially compared to the first half, but the lack of logic prevents me from giving it a full 10 out of 10. But as always, those were just my opinions. Feel free to write your opinions down in the comment section. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and if you have some spare time, feel free to watch any other video on my channel. You should see some links on screen right now. The next video will be about the next episode from the classic Star Trek called A Private Little War. Until then, thanks a lot for watching and see you soon. Bye.